I think in this industry, we are conditioned to believe that our voice is not important. We are conditioned to follow a set of rules. There is a lot of ego in this industry, in all facets, in every department. There's a lot of ego. And so what that does is that creates my voice and what you should do is the most important. And so over time, our own intuition, our own voice gets quieted, and we forget how to tap into that.
I'm here today with Erica Wernick, who is Hollywood's success coach. She is an author, a coach, a speaker, and a producer who's focused on helping people achieve their biggest dreams. And before I even allow yourself to say hello, I'm going to dig right into a really important question that I think is going to go right to the heart of our conversation in 30 seconds. Okay. Why is it in your introduction you don't say, and graphic designer on films and TV shows, such as This Is Us, Glee, and more? Why is that not in your intro?
Because that's not part of my identity anymore. And actually, I don't necessarily think any of my career is part of my identity. I think my identity is more related to my purpose, and I want to help people. I think, I'm proud of the graphic work that I have done, but what to me was more important is what I got out of that process of pursuing a dream in Hollywood, and what I take from that is how I help others, achieve their dreams, because I work with actors, writers, directors, I work with all different kinds of artists. So for me personally, I still design stuff all the time for myself and for friends. And like you said, This Is Us, I just finished This Is Us. But it's not my focus anymore in my life. It doesn't feel like that's the thing that I want to lead with.
I love that you say that your identity is your purpose. With all the things that you're doing in the world and in the industry and that I'm doing in the industry, even though the alliteration doesn't quite work, definitely sister from another mother. Brother from another mother sounds so much better. But sister from another mother. And I remember the first time, I don't remember how I had discovered you, whether it's through a search or a Facebook post or whatever. I'm like, oh my God, there's actually somebody else that's successfully doing what I want to do. I didn't know this was a thing, right? And that you don't even know this, but me seeing the work that you were doing affirmed to me that maybe this is a path that I want to pursue as well. Because there's a whole bunch of people that coach or that speak, but there are very few that actually work in the industry doing a craft that are also successfully working with others. I can think of 3 people, I'm one of them, that are actually working in the industry and coaching at the same time. You're a second one. So it's very, very difficult to do, and you're doing it successfully, and very much understand this idea of associating with your identity with your purpose. So what we're going to talk about today is how dangerous it can be to assign your identity to what it is that you do for a living and the holes that can take you down and more. But we're going to put a pin in that for a second. Okay. Because I'm talking to you like you and I have talked many times before, of which we have, and I will send people to your podcast because you and I have talked a couple of times before. But I want them to get a little bit of a sense of your story first. Sense of where it is that you initially came from, how you came to the big, fancy, magical land of Hollywood, and how you were able to first achieve your dreams and help others achieve their dreams afterwards. So let's just kind of start with the brief version of the Erica origin story.
It's funny because I always struggle with this part. I'm like, why? Nobody wants to hear about me.
That sounds like a limiting belief. We might get to those later, by the way.
No, it 100% is. And it's something that I'm working on, because when I listen to other podcasts and you hear other guests, explain, how they got to where they are, or a little bit about the background, it's interesting and I want to hear it. And so it 100% is a limiting belief that I'm working on, that, when I was writing my books, it was the same thing. Like, a friend of mine who's a really good writer was editing my book, and she was like, I'd love to hear more about you here. What's the story for you? I'm like, you want to hear more about me? What? Shouldn't I just get to the teaching points? Who gives a crap about me? All that to say, thank you for asking. I grew up acting and singing. So I was very involved in the theater community through middle school, high school, college, etc. And it wasn't until I started designing the programs and the flyers for the shows that I was in that I got interested in graphic design. But when I was graduating, high school and thinking about what I wanted to do, and then graduating college and thinking about, what does my career look like, I still felt this pull to entertainment. And I think I was always more fascinated by Hollywood than by Broadway. I had done a summer high school program at UCLA in the middle of my high school years and just fell in love with Los Angeles. I mean, whatever, if you don't live here, maybe you'll get this. Whatever we see about Los Angeles, on TV shows and movies and in media, the glamorization of Los Angeles, that was what I believed. That was me to a core. And I was always just enamored with LA and Hollywood. So when I learned that you can design graphics for television and film, I was like, yes, sign me up. I want to do that. And it was actually kind of a funny story how I discovered this, because most people have no idea what a graphic designer for TV and film does. I feel like on my Facebook post, you were even maybe, I mean, you probably knew what we did, but maybe not to the extent.
I knew what you did. I didn't realize how much of your work never got seen by an audience, right? Because whether, and you can talk more about this than I can, but having seen thousands of hours of raw dailies, I see a lot of the pieces, and it's probably my fault actually that some amazing artwork that's on the wall in the wide shot never gets used, because I'm like, I don't need a wide shot for this scene, right? It's all about the characters. But whether it's a cereal box or a diploma on the wall or a fake magazine or whatever, like somebody's got to make that stuff, right?
Yes. And actually, I will say This Is Us in particular, we call it the Talking Heads show. They don't really show establishing shots, wide shots of sets very often on This Is Us. It's a lot of close-ups of the actors. A wonderful show. I'm not going to, take anything away. But of course, the art department is like, man, I wish they would show some sets once in a while because we build such beautiful sets. So I will say, like on other TV shows that I've worked on, my work has a better opportunity of being seen. And look, the artwork on the wall, the diploma in the wall, it's not as important as obviously the story. That's why I get excited when I get to design props, because it's usually scripted. So I got to design some stuff like for the next episode that's airing next week that was scripted. And if it's scripted, there's a good chance that it's going to be on camera. But I was, back at home. I'm from Philly, 3,000 miles away, watching a very classic movie, 13 Going on 30.
Oh, yeah. That's right up there with Citizen Kane, right?
Yeah, right up there with Citizen Kane. I did not like Citizen Kane.
But 13 Going on 30.
13 Going on 30. I love that movie. Anyway, so Jennifer Garner's character was eating candy called Razzles. And I was like, oh, a graphic designer had to design that candy box. And I didn't realize that Razzles is a real candy. But what I thought about, what a graphic designer would do, it was correct. If it was a fake candy, which happens more often in television, because TV has more, rules about brands being seen. That's exactly what graphic designers do. So when I learned that, I moved to LA. I had no contacts. I knew 0 people in the industry. I knew 3 people in LA and none of them well. So it was pretty terrifying to move out here. And I booked my first TV show 2 weeks after moving because I spent many months cold emailing before I moved. And I started making, very few connections, but strong ones through cold emailing, cold messaging. And that led to me booking my first TV show. And it was a dream come true to be, working on it. I mean, look, the show that I worked on was canceled real fast. But, it was, Eric McCormick was the star, and Tom Cavanaugh, and Monica Potter. And it was just a really cool, validating experience of like, yes, this is what I want to do with my life. And so, I've been really fortunate. I've worked on over 30 television shows at this point. There have been plenty of time periods where I was not working and it was really challenging to find the next job. So I don't want to gloss over that. But as I was working on all these TV shows and living out my dream and, working at Warner Brothers and Paramount and, getting all these opportunities, I started to notice people around me struggling in their careers, whether it was an actor or a writer, people in other facets of Hollywood. And I could pretty quickly point out why they were struggling. I'm like, oh, if you just changed X, Y, and Z, I think that you would be much further along. And of course, X, Y, and Z was mostly about mindset, which then, of course, connects to action. The actions they were taking, were the actions that somebody who didn't believe in themselves 100% would take. And so one day I was working on a TV show at Warner Brothers. I was working in a bungalow that was right outside of the famous gazebo. And famous if you watch Gilmore Girls.
I was going to say, like, obviously it's like the holy grail if you're a Gilmore Girls fan.
It is the Gilmore Girls gazebo. I believe, it was also in Heart of Dixie. I believe it was also, that whole backlot was also in Pretty Little Liars, which I never watched, but I know that it was there. So it was just a really cool opportunity. I was working on a TV show, sitting in that bungalow. And a lot of times I'll get downtime in between graphics. So I had designed some graphics and I was waiting for my boss so that I could show her and get her approval and see what she thought. And there was already a line of people that were waiting to talk to her. So I'm like, all right, I have to wait until she's finished with these other meetings. In my downtime, I will watch YouTube because that's what so many of us do during our downtime. And I came across a video that was a Super Soul Sunday video. Oprah was interviewing Jack Canfield. And Jack Canfield, if you don't know, he is the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul. He's also, now a coach. And his self-help book was the very first self-help book I ever read. And I read it when I moved to LA. And I really credit a lot of my success to what I learned in that book. And so very exciting, to see Jack being interviewed by Oprah. I was really engrossed in the video. And a couple minutes into the video, I just had this overwhelming moment take over. I could feel my eyes starting to tear up. I was starting to cry. And I had this internal voice say to me, Erica, what are you doing? You're supposed to be helping people. And it was just a really profound moment in my life where I just felt like I've been designing graphics for so long and it's been so great, but I do want to help others achieve their dreams as well. And so shortly after that, I started my coaching business. And that is kind of the shorter version of how I ended up where I am now. But, I really am, I would say, obsessed. I really truly feel it's my purpose. Just how can I help as many people as possible achieve their biggest dreams, no matter what they are?
Yeah, I share that same obsession, obviously. And I could get all the awards and accolades in the world. But what I love, the reason I wake up, is I've got a Slack channel with my coaching community. It's called the Wins Channel. And people put their wins, whether they get a huge career-changing job opportunity, and I don't know what's in the water, but 3 people this week alone in my community have landed gigantic career-changing opportunities. And sometimes it's just, hey, I took a walk this afternoon. Win, right? So the wins are all varied. But when people ask me, why do I do what I do? I even talked about this on a podcast where I was a guest recently. I said, it's my Wins Channel. I'm obsessed with helping other people succeed because when they succeed, I get to succeed. And that's so much more fun than working in the small, dark room with the rattly air conditioner, with no windows, with an amazing snack wall of garbage that makes you want to take a nap all day long. And yeah, I get a credit on a TV show and a paycheck, but kind of what's the point, right? And I think that what I realized, and this was a really difficult realization for me and was a huge hit to my identity, which is going to help us kind of transition more to what you have gone through recently. And I had this realization 6 or 7 years ago. I was working on Empire at the time, and then I was also thinking about this, I think might have even been when I was working on Cobra Kai. I actually had this conversation with the showrunners of Cobra Kai, and I said, here's the reality. Anybody can sit in my chair and do this job, and you're still going to have a TV show. It's still going to be your show. And yes, am I better than some people at doing this? Sure. Am I able to intuit what you want and make better choices, whether it's music or montages? Yeah, I'm good at what I do. But if I disappear, you're going to find somebody else to sit in this chair and the work will get done, which means that me being here had little to no impact. However, the work that I'm doing with the website, with the podcast, and the coaching program, if that goes away, things change. Something about the world changes. And I'm not saying that the entire world changes, but there's an impact that personal investment that you have in other people changes other people's lives. And I said, I no longer want to steal from that just so I can continue earning more credits and getting more things on IMDb Pro and maybe getting awards, because you can replace me there. Everything's going to be the same. I stopped doing this, things change. And it sounds like you had a very, very similar realization.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's the same thing for graphics, you know? If I left, they'll just replace me with another graphic designer. I mean, that's what I did on This Is Us. The graphic designer had to leave, so I finished the show. And it's interesting, you know, with what you talk about, how, you know, if you left your business, you know, the coaching piece, that it really would make a big impact. And what I've learned is it's not even just the impact with the people that we're coaching or working with. It's then all their people around them in their lives. Because when somebody goes after their dream in a big way, they don't even have to achieve it. Just the act of pursuing it in a really big way inspires people all around them. And I really do believe that it creates, you know, a lot more joy and light into the world. And, you know, a lot of times with my acting clients, we talk about number one on the call sheet and how to set the tone, you know, so it's like so much of the work that we're doing will, you know, is reverberate the right word? I can't even think of words today. You know, it will really trickle out through so many other people. You know, it's not even just a one-to-one impact. It can impact thousands of people beyond us.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. And I think what you're looking for is the ripple effect. Reverberate
yes.
and trickle down, both
Yes.
acceptable. But I think you're looking for the ripple effect. So all three very much acceptable, and understand all of those. But here's the danger in all of this. For me, and I know that you may have gone through something similarly, when I decided that I wanted to be a coach and help people, boy, was that hard for my identity as an editor to accept. Because that's not just what I do, that's who I am. I'm an editor. I've been an editor since I was literally 9 years old. And I'm going to win the Oscar for myself because that's what I wanted. My mom literally bought me a giant chocolate Easter bunny and said, this is your Oscar until you can replace it with a real one. I still have it somewhere in a box. And I feel bad because I'm probably never going to replace it because I just don't care anymore. And that's not a goal of mine. But I went through a transitional process for years where I couldn't accept the fact that I was no longer an editor working towards an Oscar. So for you, when you were deciding that you no longer were a graphic designer and this is my calling and this is my purpose, did you too go through a sort of crisis making this transition?
No.
Oh, good for you. Well, that's going to be a short conversation.
It was just a very different experience for me. I think that because I think that the alignment that I felt with helping other people felt like my purpose all along, felt like my identity all along. You know, when I moved to LA, like I said, I read Jack Canfield's book. And a couple years after that, I started attending marketing boot camps for coaches and authors. When I was a graphic designer for television, I wasn't an author. I wasn't a coach. I don't know why I went. I just thought they sounded cool. I'm like, that sounds really interesting. I want to go. And I went to them for years. So I think that it was building for so many years that for me, it wasn't the identity crisis with that piece. But it was terrifying, you know, when I was working on Superstore when I decided to leave a show in the middle of the show and go full-time with my business. And that decision was terrifying and took time. And I had a lot of fear and doubts around that. And so that part was terrifying. But no, I never I think also because I grew up acting and singing, and like I never had the Oscar award, or like I never like thought, oh, I want to win awards for design or anything like that. If anything, I thought I want to impress my design teachers from school. I want them to think that I'm doing a good job, which is, a whole other stuff that I've been working on. But
Which you write about, by the way, and it's a very engaging story.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it is fascinating to me that I've graduated 14 years ago and I'm still like, do my professors think I'm doing a good job? I still want to impress them. Yeah, a lot of stuff to work through. But yeah, so it was a different experience for me, but I will say the identity piece comes up in other ways. And it's something like I'm very aware of. And I think that when the pandemic hit, and especially in the beginning when we were quarantined and we couldn't leave our homes, it became very aware if you attach your identity to your job. Right. Or like to me, like how much money you make, because those things were taken away from us. And suddenly it was like, oh, who am I without these things? So I understand it very, very well. I just personally with design, I didn't have that.
Yeah, that's all great. I'm glad you didn't have to go through any of that, whatever.
Trust me, I struggle with a million other things. So
which we're going to get you, by the way. I keep
Yes.
keep plugging the big thing we're moving towards. But I think what's really important to highlight here, and this is actually something you specialize in with your clients. You don't just coach and say, well, do this, and here are action steps and frameworks. And by the way, you have all of those things. But I think an area where you really specialize is really being able to trust your own intuition. And it sounds to me like you were much more aware of your inner feelings than I might have been, where you were able to use your intuition and say, you know what, I don't need to design. I'm here to help people. It took me a lot longer to figure that out. But let's talk about how important intuition is in this process of deciding what does our path look like. Because you really focus on both the mindset side and the emotional side, not just here are the action steps to break into Hollywood. So how important is intuition, and how is it that you were able to trust it, and how do you teach other people to be able to trust theirs?
Yeah, I was talking to one of the casting people, This Is Us, the other day about what I do. And he was like, oh my God, like everybody needs that because this business is 90% mindset. I mean, if you're pursuing a quote unquote big dream in Hollywood, it's not just about the actions you take. And you'll see that. And like, I think actors more than anyone understand this. I would say maybe directors too, a little bit, maybe writers, because there's so much waiting. There's so many other pieces to it that you have to be able to get a handle on your thoughts and your beliefs and what you tell yourself about that time. So to me, it's really important. And actually my new book that I just finished, You Are the Magic, is about intuition. And I think it's particularly important in this industry because I think in this industry, we are conditioned to believe that our voice is not important. We are conditioned to follow a set of rules. There is a lot of ego in this industry, in all facets, in every department. There's a lot of ego. And so what that does is that creates like my voice and what you should do is the most important. And so over time, our own intuition, our own voice gets quieted and we forget how to tap into that. And I think that I was always tapping into mine, but I wasn't as aware of it. And it was always scary. Like there have been times where I quit a TV show before, not just Superstore to do my business full time, but like I quit a show that I was really unhappy on. And that is terrifying. Most people would say like, but you don't have another show lined up. What are you doing? But I was so unhappy and my intuition was like, you need to get out. And so I just think it's so important to be able to listen to your own voice and to advocate for yourself and to, feel like your ideas and your instincts are worthy of being heard, whether it's by you or by anyone else. And a lot of what I talk about in my new book with intuition is, look, in Hollywood and in so many other places, there's no one path. It's not like if you were going to go work in accounting and you were like, okay, I go to accounting school, maybe I become a CPA and then I send a resume into a company and then I interview and then I get a job. That is not Hollywood, unfortunately. There's no clear-cut one path. And so
can I actually interrupt you?
Yes.
Because I completely and totally disagree with that. And
I'm
going to tell you why, and I think you might like this.
Okay.
I think there is a path that everybody follows. Everybody has a different story. So I'm going to workshop this with you right now as a fellow coach, and I want to see if you agree or disagree with this. And then we'll go right back to what you said. But I think this is really important for people that are listening. I spent a decade breaking down everybody's stories. That's essentially what I do with the podcast. Tell me your success story. Everybody's is unique, the exact same steps, exact same path, but how they do it and what it looks like on the surface is different. So imagine instead of talking to filmmakers, you're talking to a room of doctors. Can you imagine going up to each doctor individually and saying, oh my God, it's amazing you're a doctor. How did you become a doctor? Well, I went to undergraduate, majored in pre-med, and then I went to medical school, and then I got a fellowship or an internship, and then after I went through X number of years, I became a doctor. That's amazing. Hey, how did you become a doctor? Same story over and over and over. Also the same path, but it's pretty much the same story. A little bit of nuance in how long it might have taken or whatever practices they tried or whatever. But essentially, nobody says, oh my God, that's amazing. How did you become a doctor, right? You ask somebody, oh my God, how did you become a successful actor or graphic designer or film editor, et cetera, et cetera. Exact same path, all different stories. Your story different than mine, although I have to say, yours is about the closest to my story I've ever heard because you got your first job less than 2 weeks after graduation, which never happens. I got mine a week after graduation, but it's the same general idea of spending months and months doing the outreach beforehand, planting the seeds, building the relationships so you can move into your job, right? But what I've been saying on my podcast and everything I write about is essentially it's the same path. Number one, this is something you talk about a lot. You have to be very clear on what is the ladder that you want to climb. And I'm sure you talked about this with your actors, writers, directors. It's not just I want to act, it's what do you want to do? If you want to work in commercials versus television versus features, different industries. So you choose the very specific ladder. Then you have to work at and become awesome at your craft. And then people need to know that you're awesome at your craft. You do those three things, you're going to be successful. I think it's that simple. Discuss.
I really enjoy the mansplaining of interrupting me to tell me I'm wrong and let me immediately hear your version of what it is. I totally disagree. I think that's semantics.
Let's debate.
I mean, it's not a debate to me. I just totally disagree. And look, I've also worked with many different types of artists. Look, a graphic designer, sure. They're probably going to be an art PA and then they're going to get into the union and then they're going to, try to get on shows as a designer. Sure. But like a writer, there's like 7 or 9 different ways in which you could become a successful writer, right? So you could start as a writer's PA or a writer's assistant in a writer's room. You could sit in your own apartment and never leave it and get a manager who shops your scripts around and then you sell a script. You could get, staffed on a show as a writer. You could work as an assistant to a producer who gets their own, which I've had a friend who did this, a producer who had an overall deal with a studio. And so then that producer works on their own shows until the studio picks up one of them. And then when they pick up one of them, they get to write. So to me, it's, sure, you want to say, oh, it's study your craft and then have somebody notice your craft. Like that, to me, that's like minimizing it to something incredibly oversimplified. And I don't think Hollywood works that way. Like, I don't even think it's about that because I always tell my clients, like, how many times have you watched a TV show and you were like, oh, that acting was bad? Or, oh, that writing was terrible. So, because I always say the law of attraction doesn't give a shit about your talent. So to me, it's not about that. To me, it's not about not that honing your craft isn't important, but I think there are so many doors, there are so many paths in, and I believe that your intuition will guide you to your specific one. So what you might call a story, is what I'm calling, a path. There are actors who, will start on the indie route and do lots of non-union stuff and then finally get an agent and a manager, and then work their way up to a co-star and get their first co-star. And then maybe they do 5 co-stars, and then maybe they finally get a guest star, and then maybe they finally get a recurring, and then maybe years down the line, they book a series regular. There could also be another path where somebody does, for example, my cousin, his first feature film was with Sundance Labs. He won Sundance, and his movie was then nominated for Best Picture for an Oscar, his first feature. So, and like same thing with actors, there are actors, I always talk about Gilmore Girls, like Alexis Bledel had never acted before, and she booked her first show was a series regular. So in that sense, to me, like there are so many different paths in this industry, so many ways in, and not even just so many ways in, but then so many ways in which you grow your career. Somebody like Kristen Bell and Dax Shepard, they've started businesses, which is really super cool. They have a line of clothes, baby products, at Walmart. And they've done commercials and acting, and then Kristen obviously has done singing, and then they've hosted a reality show, a game show or something, so their path looks so different than, let's say, an actor who is on Grey's Anatomy and stays on it for 15 years, right? So I do think that paths in creative fields just can look so different, and I think the way in which we find our path that is best for us is by listening to our intuition and letting it guide us. I really, truly believe that our intuition will show us every step that we need to take. Like you're on a scavenger hunt and you receive the next clue, and you receive the next clue, and you receive the next clue, and your intuition leads you to each one. Like even me breaking in to Hollywood, working my first show 2 weeks after moving to LA, the person that decided to help me, like the timing of it was part of my path, because I developed an eye disease in my left eye a week before I was supposed to move to LA. And it was bad, really bad. And our very good family friend is an eye doctor. And so he was like, I had to take steroid pills in addition to drops. I still take drops to this day. And, they were like, maybe you should hold your move off a month or so. Let's get this under control. And something in my intuition said, no, you have to go now. I will get an eye doctor in Los Angeles. And so my eye doctor looked up people. I got a specialist at UCLA. It was a horrible, terrible, terrifying time moving to a new city where I knew nobody, didn't have a place to live, staying on a couch of someone's house, someone's apartment, and taking massive steroid pills that messes with your emotions, and just everything has such a big impact on your life. But the person who answered my cold message, who was willing to help me, was offered a show that he could not take. And so he recommended me in his place. And if I did not move that week and I moved a month later, that position would have already been filled. And who knows when I would have booked something. So to me, that's what our intuition can play such a big part in our path if we're, willing and open to listening to it.
I knew if anybody was going to vigorously debate and disagree with me, it was going to be you, which is why I wanted to stop to have that conversation. Because this is something that you feel very passionate about and talk about all the time, and I could not let that go. So I apologize if it came off as mansplaining, but I knew that you were going to debate me, and I was going to get you all riled up and get an amazing response and explanation. So,
well, I hope that helps. I hope that was clear.
Not only did it help, I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I was riveted by all of it. And I'm hoping that it didn't come off the way, but that was kind of the point, is I really wanted to get you riled up and energetic, because I know I've seen you you're so good at social media, by the way, and I see this in you all the time. It's not just, here's the information and this is a business and I'm a coach. It is so clear that you care about this and you want to help others. And I see your stories almost every day, and like you just have this fire inside. I needed to throw just a tiny bit of lighter fluid on it. So now I've got you all riled up.
Well, you did. I'm riled up.
All right, good.
What else you got? Throw it at
me. So now I'm super excited to keep talking about this.
Okay.
So if the paths are so crazily different, how do you help people use their intuition to figure out what path is the best fit for them?
So one of the things, and I do this in my first book too. So we start with what you're talking about, the ladder, and we reverse engineer the ladder, right? So if you want to be, like I said, the series regular, or let's say you want to win an Oscar, that's your top goal. We work backwards and we come up with the general steps, like, well, in order to win an Oscar, I have to work on a film that's Oscar worthy. Okay, I got to work on a film. In order for that to happen, I've got to book that role. In order for that to happen, I need my agent to get me the audition, or I need to be seen somewhere else, right? So we go down the standard sort of steps. And then I tell my clients that this is like a base foundation of a path. You can skip levels. You can shoot out to the sides. It can look so different. How you get from one step to another is going to be led by your intuition. You will be led, where to go. So, look, it's not like we don't talk about strategy. All the time when I work with my clients, we'll talk about, strategy, and I'll look at their emails and cold emails and all that kind of stuff. But I think what's more important, and I can see it because I have coached so many actors and they've all had very different paths and, careers and stories. What I feel like I'm here to do, one of, I think, my superpowers is to help people believe in themselves in a way that they've maybe haven't believed in themselves before. And once you can get to that place, then it becomes much easier to notice the intuitive hits that come to you and get the confidence and courage to follow them. So, I really, like, for example, one of my clients who has become a great friend, she is from Oman and she has lived all over the world. She's fluent in like 3 or 4 different languages. I mean, she is the most incredible, backstory that is so interesting. And she was in New York and then she moved to LA. She booked her first TV show, an actress, this year, which is really exciting. And it was recurring. Her very first TV show was recurring, 5 episodes. Tomorrow, or this weekend, I'm going to visit her to say goodbye because she's moving to France for several months. And we would talk about this, what an acting coach or an acting teacher or someone in the industry might tell someone like her is, you need to be here. What are you doing? You can't leave LA. If you want to be acting, you need to be in LA. And there are some agents that have a rule. I know a particular agent because my client was with that agent who said you can't leave, like especially during episodic or, the heights of the season. And I told her, I'm like, this is your path. Like, France lights you up and makes you so happy. It's part of like your soul's decision of where it wants to be. You need to go there and see where it leads you. Go get, we talked about like, go get an agent in France, in Europe. So her path is going to look different because I'm allowing herself, helping her feel the permission to pursue her career in a way that feels good to her, that might completely go against the typical type of advice, career advice for an actor.
What's so important about what you just said that I want everybody to understand and internalize, that I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody that made this clear and apparent, is that the number one skill you need to have is not just a coach, but a good coach, is your ability to help other people believe in themselves. It's not about the frameworks. It's not about the steps. It's not about the online courses. You can have all the information. If people don't believe that they can achieve their goals, all of it's useless. Mm-hmm. The other component of that that's so important, if you're not interested in being a coach, which I'm guessing 99% of our audience is not, if you are looking for one, you need to find a coach that helps you believe in yourself. Because if you don't, somebody's just regurgitating all the same frameworks and steps of all the other influencers and personal developers, and all that's great, right? Like,
yes, I have a
go ahead.
Good example of this that happened to me because I'm not coaching anymore. I have a small membership thing, but as you said in my my bio, I'm writing books and I'm producing because I want to help people in a bigger way. I want to reach more people. And I had a coach who I was working with a couple years ago. And my intuition was starting to say, I don't want to coach anymore. I wanted to do something connected with Hollywood, but helping people through Hollywood in a bigger way. And I didn't know yet that was through television, that I wanted to produce television and write books. But I just had this intuitive hit of like, I don't want to be coaching anymore. And my coach, and she was a great coach in a lot of other ways. I don't want to tear her down, but she kept telling me, oh no, you probably just don't love your clients enough. If you find clients that you love even more, that's what you should be focusing on. So she continued to give me advice based on her bubble of the coaching industry and what that looks like, instead of letting me explore what my intuition was telling me, and essentially telling my intuition was wrong. And I've had coaches tell me that before, that my intuition is wrong. I had someone say that phrase to me, your intuition is wrong. So anyway, I just wanted to share that because yes, like I think it's so important for, if you're going to be working with someone, to find someone that is gonna hold the space for you to explore whatever it is that you need to explore, and to help you figure that out, and to help you feel confident, have the courage to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had a student at the end of 12 weeks say, you blew my mind with how you organized your Trello lists and cards. Can't thank you enough. And by the way, they enjoy my Trello strategies, or I bought BusyCal because of you, right? But the message you get over and over, and I'm sure you get the same, is can't thank you enough. I actually believe this is possible.
Yes.
Right? And if that's the impact you can have and that's it, that can be life-changing for somebody. And going back to this coach that you mentioned, there's this word that I hear that I hate so much that I think should frankly be called a disease. Pragmatism. Be pragmatic. Choose the safer route. Choose the comfortable route, right? Like, oh, what's the matter with you? Oh, I came down with a horrible case of pragmatism, right? Just keeping me from all of my dreams and my goals.
Yeah.
And choosing the discomfort over the comfort is usually what's going to lead to the growth and the success. Like there's a saying, I didn't come up with it. It's been popularized recently. I've seen it all over the internet, but essentially it's that if you make easy choices, your life is going to be hard. If you make hard choices, your life is going to become much easier. And you being pragmatic and choosing to continue coaching and having clients that you like better, that is the pragmatic and that is the safe choice. But your intuition does not often align with that. So what I'm really interested in now, which is really kind of what we've been teasing the whole time, what happened when you decided that you didn't want to coach anymore, and all of a sudden all of these goals and systems and frameworks weren't really getting you where you wanted to get? Talk me through that phase.
Well, I love that we're like teasing my depression as if it's like, coming up next week, Erica's depression. No, it's really interesting that you phrase it that way, because that is one of the things that triggered my depression. Because I don't know if you're like this. I feel like you might be, because we're similar. I have always been a goal-oriented person. I'm, a high achiever. I'm always taking action. I mean, I still have doubts and I'm scared sometimes, but I'm always working towards something specific. And when I started to realize I didn't want to coach anymore, what I wanted to do instead hadn't come to me yet. And this is actually where my new book came from, because when you don't know what you're working towards, but you're ready to let go of something, but you have no idea what you're going to move towards instead, that is where I had an identity crisis. When you talked about your identity, that was extremely hard for me, because my whole life, I'm the person that writes the goals down and works towards something super specific and is very ambitious. And to not know what my next thing was, that just like, I say in the book, it like ripped me to shreds, because that was my identity. And it's, if I'm not that goal person, like, how do I handle my life right now? How do I figure out my next thing? And so I would try to figure out my next thing strategically. You know, like I would take courses and I would, you know, read books and I would, you know, listen to podcasts, talk to coaches. Everything I did was like, how can I strategically figure out what my next step is? And it wasn't until I was feeling really stuck. This was a couple years ago. I was feeling really stuck, and a friend of mine invited me to volunteer at Gabby Bernstein's book launch event. And it was in a theater, and she was speaking and, you know, selling books. And I volunteered and helped set up the stage with my friend. And when I was standing on that stage, setting it up before everybody came in, I had this, I don't even know how to explain it. I just had this like wave of intuition and say, I want this. And I'm like, what do you mean I want this? I don't know what that is. Like, and the, you know, as I watched her, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to write books and help people and talk to them like this. And, you know, and so then it became like, oh, one of my next things is writing a book. So that answer didn't come to me through strategy though. You know, I talk about how like, it wasn't something that I got from a pro and con list. You know, it really felt like something that I received. And actually, I think that, you know, a lot of creative people might agree that how you receive your dream is similar. You know, saying you want to be an Oscar-winning editor in Hollywood is not going to come from a pro-con list, you know, or like what's the, as you say, the pragmatic, you know, decision here. You know, our dreams come from a deeper place. So, so then I wrote my first book, and that was great, but still wasn't sure. I still didn't like the TV stuff. The TV show thing wasn't there yet. And then also the pandemic hit. And that became really challenging because it changed our lives in so many ways. If we didn't lose our life, if we were fortunate enough to not lose our life. And I felt so lost. I felt, like I said, an identity crisis. Who am I? What am I doing with my life? I still want to help people achieve their dreams. I just don't know, like, how, like, I just want to do it through a different means, but I don't know what that looks like. And it was years, like, you know, the past couple of years. And so last year, I wrote another book. Didn't even realize it, but I was depressed the entire time writing that book.
And this is when you were writing Meant for This?
Mm-mm.
So no, this is the You Are the Magic.
Yes.
Because your timeline is different than me watching you on Instagram talk about it. So I want to make sure I'm understanding the right books. Okay, got it.
Yeah. I mean, and I've experienced depression many times in my life. The first time, my first year in LA, but usually like 1 or 2 times a year, I experienced depression. And so the pandemic coupled with me feeling super lost in my life, it's like the two of those things collided and really triggered my depression. And I somehow wrote a book through it. And when I finished that book, I was like, I need to read this and make sure it's okay. Because I think I was really depressed when I wrote this. But it just like, you know, after even I finished that book and I still didn't know what to do, it was just really, really dark. And my depression was probably the worst I had ever experienced in my life. And it was the first time that I truly understood when people say it's something chemical in your brain, because I felt like a different person. And the things that I normally would do to help me feel good were not working. And it was sort of like this thing I couldn't control. It was kind of like this dark cloud was following me everywhere. And I did all the healthy things. I would meditate, I would exercise, I would be outside in the sun, I would go down to the ocean. I would try to do all these things to fill myself up and make myself feel better, and nothing worked. Like that dark cloud was still there. And I remember one time I took myself out to dinner in the Palisades at my favorite place, because that's usually one thing I do to make myself feel good. And I went by myself, and I was sitting at the restaurant, and I wanted to cry the entire meal. I didn't because I was in public, but that is how I was feeling in the moment. And it just felt like, oh my gosh, like I can't control this. This is something that's taken over my brain. It might have been triggered by real life events, but something is changing in the chemistry in my brain. And then, I don't know, I'm still talking about this. Do you want me to keep going?
I haven't interrupted you yet.
I know. I'm like, am I talking too much about this?
No, this is absolutely wonderful. Keep going. I have nothing to
Okay.
add. By the way, I am now going to interrupt you. It's okay to talk about yourself, and this is amazing, and this is really helpful for other people. Sometimes talking about your own struggles is what help other people believe in themselves and achieve theirs, which you already know. But when it comes to yourself,
Intellectually,
it's hard to listen to that and believe. Intellectually, you know that. I'm not telling you something you don't know, but emotionally, as you said at the beginning, this is something you struggle with. Think of this as your practice, because what you're doing is phenomenal. Keep going.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. It is like I hear myself talking and I'm like, Erica, maybe you should shut up.
Yeah, nobody cares. Why does anybody want to hear my story?
Why does anybody care? I'm still talking.
I assure you it's the polar opposite.
Okay. So I started to get to a point where I was basically on the couch or my bed the whole time. I stopped working and I forgot when I started to feel better and I sat at my computer and worked for a day, I forgot that that's like what my normal life used to be like. Because when I was depressed, I did not work at all. So that impacted so many aspects of my life. I mean, I was really broke. I mean, fortunately, I had some savings and I survived and my parents helped me out a little bit. But I was, on the couch most of the times. I'm really close with my parents, and sometimes I just wouldn't answer their calls. I couldn't talk to anyone. I just felt so depressed that I didn't want to answer the phone. I didn't want to answer text. I would sit on the couch, and I think because of the Apple Watch, I'm like super aware. Like I got no steps in, like I was not moving my body, let alone exercising. So every now and then I would get enough energy to go outside and walk. And sometimes I would drive to other neighborhoods that I like on the west side. I want to be near the ocean and I would walk there. But I was in such a dark space that it just impacted all these other areas of my life. Like I said, like I wasn't even moving my body. And then on top of that, I would order takeout a lot. Like I can look back at my Grubhub history and I'm like, oh my gosh, like back when I was super depressed, I was ordering takeout like 8 or 10 times a month. Whereas now I do it like 3 or 4. So it had more than doubled. So I was eating really badly, not moving my body. And then I do remember for me, and it's easier to see this looking back now that I am healthy, but I feel like I'm going to cry. The scariest moment for me and why I really knew it was something chemical in my brain is that I literally did not have hope. And I'm a success coach. I spend my life being positive and helping other people, be positive. And my mom would say, like things will get better, things will look different. And I was like, no, they will not. And I wasn't just arguing with her. My brain, I could not see it. I literally could not fathom the concept that I could ever feel differently or that things in my life could ever be different. And to me, that's like the scariest thing of all, to lose hope. It made me like, when I, got better, it made me like, oh my gosh, I'm really grateful for hope. Like I just have this newfound appreciation for believing that tomorrow could be different from today. And it's so scary to think that I didn't have hope. And so while I was going through this time, I mostly didn't tell anybody. My parents knew. I talked to my parents every day. Like I said, there were some days where I wouldn't even talk to them. It was so lonely. And also I was creating that because I didn't want to tell anybody, and I'm a big fan of Brené Brown, and she talks a lot about vulnerability. And it would be so vulnerable for me to tell somebody my darkest thoughts and what I'm experiencing. And I was so afraid that somebody wouldn't be able to hold that space for me. I just was not in a place where I'd be okay if they couldn't hold that space. And so that really stopped me from telling people. And eventually, I think I told one or two friends, and they were supportive in the moment, but I don't think they knew what to do with it. Like I say, like one of my friends was so supportive in the moment, came over the next day, took me out to lunch and everything. And then I never heard from her again for a month. Now she was working on a show, and I know what it's like to be working on a TV show. You have no life, and it's hard to like think about anything else. So I don't really fault her. And plus I never expressed my needs. I never said this is what I need, but I learned a lot, from that experience that like, oh my gosh, mental health, something like depression is not too different from a physical illness. And, it's like if I had cancer, God forbid, if I had cancer, would somebody check on me? Right? Probably, right? But it's so different. It's like if I have depression, like people might just think, oh, you're like, I think we throw that word around depressed without understanding like the clinical, definition behind it.
You just need to get some sleep. A couple good nights of sleep, relax, read a book, maybe get a massage. Things are going to be all better.
Right.
You use cancer, the one that I like to use, and I think cancer is great. I use diabetes. It's like going to somebody with diabetes. It's like, insulin? Really? I mean, can't you just get a couple of nights of sleep and you'll be fine? Like, do you really need the medication? It sounds absurd, but it's because we understand that. You can get a blood test and a doctor can say, you have type 2 or type 1 diabetes, and therefore to make sure that your pancreas creates insulin and you don't go into diabetic shock, you need insulin artificially. Duh, makes sense. I don't want to die. You start talking about things like mental health, it's very esoteric because it's very much a gray area. People don't really understand it unless they've been through it. Everything you're saying, they're just like, yep. But if they haven't, they don't really understand it because it's this invisible thing. Like you can't see, I have a gash on my arm. Therefore, I have an infection. Therefore, I need antibiotics, right? So what I find, at least for me personally, I'm not speaking for your experience, but my experience is that I find it, or I used to find it very hard to share it with anybody because they immediately invalidate it. Like I had somebody very close to me in my family, not going to mention who it is, but the first time I went through this, it was exactly what I just told you. Dude, you're working hard. Get some sleep and you'll be fine. It's all in your head. Yeah, it was all in my head, but it was also neurochemical, right?
Right.
So much neurochemistry was completely imbalanced. And the wall that I came up against next, which I'm curious if you came up against it as well, is who am I as a person if I need medication? All right, this is something that I actually talked about totally unrelated, but today in 2 separate coaching sessions, and one person said, well, if I need medication, that means that I'm no good. They literally said those words. And I came across the exact same challenge of who am I as a person if I need this? Did you go through something similar?
I had an extra layer, which I'm curious if you have felt this. The extra layer was, what kind of coach am I?
Bingo. Oh boy. Yes. Keep going. But boy, can I relate to that.
And that, it makes me sad, but that was the hardest part because I knew people in the coaching industry. I don't know if they would have decided then that I wasn't a good coach or that I'm not doing the work. I'm not doing enough of the internal work, and I should be able to mindset my way out of this.
You're just talking the talk, but you don't walk the walk.
Right.
Right? You're all full of crap and you're telling me to do all these things. You don't do them yourself, clearly, because you've now failed, right? Those are the thoughts that go through my head.
Exactly. That's how I felt. I felt I'm a failure of a coach and a person who does the internal work. We talk about limiting beliefs. Like I do deep ass work on my thoughts, and meditation. And, I do all those things. I'm therapy. Like, I do all the things. And my mom really helped me because I felt like a huge failure. And I felt very torn because I felt like I really want to get medication. And I think I'm at the point where it will help me when I really started to notice that the normal healthy things that I would do weren't working. And my mom was like amazing and supportive and super encouraging. But it was the coach piece. And I would go into deep dives on social media and on Instagram and look. And there were some famous coaches. Mel Robbins. I don't know if you know who Mel Robbins is.
Absolutely, yes.
There were some famous coaches that were talking about depression and anxiety and medication. And it wasn't until I saw people I admire who are way ahead of me in the success game in terms of coaching or helping people. It wasn't until I saw them, saying it's okay, and it not taking anything away from what they have to offer the world or how they offer it, that I really, truly got the courage. It wasn't until I saw other people I admired talking about it. And that's why it's so important for me to talk about it, because that was the thing that made me feel okay, that gave me the courage to talk to a psychiatrist and get medication. And actually, you mentioned the blood test with diabetes. I had a blood test and my health went to shit. Like, my numbers were so bad. And I remember when I got my results back, I was like crying for like a day because I was so scared I was going to die or something. Like, I didn't know what the numbers meant. And like right now, it's been almost 6 months. I'm taking vitamin D prescription once a week. Oh, wait, I think I forgot to take it this week. That reminds me. Once a week. I've been getting B12 shots every other week at my doctor. I changed my diet because I was eating so poorly. I started counting calories December 1st because I used to be super into fitness and health, and I would do the macros and I would be at the gym for 2 hours. I did a health program and I was like, you know what? I have to make this easy for myself. I'm not going to put any pressure on myself. This is not about macros. This is not about getting fit. This is about getting my numbers back. I'm just going to do something. So I won't even open my Fitness Pal because I thought it was going to be too triggering. I opened a spreadsheet. And I'm like, I'm just going to count calories. That's all I'm going to do right now. And I've been counting. I haven't missed a day since December 1st because I made something just super easy that didn't have pressure around it. And I've lost a lot of weight. And I'm actually excited to get my blood test again, in another month when it's been 6 full months and the doctor will see me again. But yeah, like it impacted so many areas of my health and the medicine. When I'm on Wellbutrin. I like to say it out loud just because, people might wonder. I'm on the generic of it. And actually when my doctor gave me choice, she gave me 2 medicines to she's like, you can look into these. Here's some information on them. Let me know which one you feel interested in, which I thought was really cool. And I literally typed Wellbutrin into Twitter. And it was 247 tweets in the last hour. I was like, what? It just opened up my eyes so much. And I saw a tweet that made me cry. And it said, someone had said, 15 years ago, I started on Wellbutrin. And when it started working, I walked outside one day and noticed that the sun was shining. And I just lost it because I was like, oh my God, I didn't even realize that I didn't even notice the sun was shining. It's like the fog. It's like I didn't even notice if it was a beautiful day. And that just got me. And so I'm a little bit of a tangent. But anyway, so that really helped. And then because the medicine helped me, it took a long time though. Well, it took the amount of time the doctor told me it would take. But, it took about 6 weeks until I started feeling better. And then about 8 weeks until I started feeling like myself. But as I started to feel better, then I could slowly start working back other things into my life to help the physical part of my health, get back, like I said, counting calories and exercising. I started counting calories December 1st. I didn't start exercising regularly until 3 months ago. So it took me like 3 months of just focusing on calories, and I couldn't get there yet. It took me a long time. And then when I started to get back to work, I was like, oh my God, I forgot I used to sit in front of the computer all day and enjoy it and like feel excited and want to work on things. And that was mind blowing to me because it felt like it had been so long since I had done work that I forgot that was my normal life. So some of those things were, the result of me starting to feel better and being on medication.
Rewinding back to the beginning of the conversation and all of your self-conscious limiting beliefs of, does anybody ever want to hear my story? You sharing this is potentially going to save somebody's life. Because somebody's going to listen to the conversation we just had and say, oh my God, that's me right now. Just like you read the tweet or just like you did the research, somebody's going to listen to this and say, oh my God, this is me. And I don't have hope. And Erica may have just given me hope. Now you know why I tease this. Because I knew how important, how vital this conversation was going to be for people listening. So that was why I wanted to have this conversation. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate the honesty, the candor, the vulnerability, because that vulnerability is where the impact comes from, which is in alignment with your purpose, having a positive impact on people. It's not about the systems or the frameworks, right? I believe that beyond being a great coach and doing so by allowing people to believe in themselves, I think the other component that's vital is empathy. Sympathy is one thing. You can be a very sympathetic coach, but I don't think you can be a truly amazing coach without empathy. And you now have gone through an experience to help you understand what other people are going through. That to me is tremendously vital to the work that you have already done that you may not be doing anymore, but so tremendously vital to the work that you're going to do next.
Thank you. I mean, I hope so. I will say that, well, I actually told my clients before I told the world, before I posted publicly on Facebook. And I did a live in our Facebook group and I cried and they were incredible. They were so supportive. And I do think that it made our connection even stronger because, I can relate to them if they, feel this way. And when I posted publicly on Facebook, I actually got a lot of private messages from people saying, oh, I'm on this medication. Oh, I'm on this medication. Here's what I went through. Thank you for sharing. And so like, even if just one person like hears this and feels less alone, then it's so worth it to me. I listened to a podcast episode. I remember I was taking a walk and it was Jamila Jamil, who I love. And she was on Conan O'Brien's podcast and they were talking about depression. And I was like, this is so great. They're talking about depression. I feel less alone. Until they both said something. And I don't remember the exact words, but they said something along the lines of like, oh, mine is not like the debilitating kind, or like mine is not, like it doesn't stop me from like living my life. It was not that dark. And I remember Conan being like, oh yeah, me too. And I was like, oh fuck.
Well, let's just minimize all of it, shall we?
Right. Like, and I know they're such good people and they were doing such a good thing by talking about it. I know they didn't mean it, but in that moment I felt shitty because I was like, oh, they're talking about it and that's so great, but I feel it maybe deeper and darker than they are experiencing because everyone's experience is different. So that's why I want to tell people I've experienced it really, really dark, deep ways that have impacted my life in a huge way. And I want to tell you that because I don't want someone listening to this say, oh, they're minimizing it and I don't feel as seen.
Well, what I can tell you, and I don't know how much this is going to relate to anybody listening, but I know that you'll relate to, is how hard it is to share this, especially when your livelihood depends on you being the one that's got it, quote unquote, all figured out. Mm-hmm. So when I first started dealing with depression, it was something I had to deal with internally that I didn't even believe was real. And then I went through the process and talked to doctors and started medication, and I started to accept it. It's a part of who I am, and it's something that I'm just going to have to learn how to deal with. It took me years to start to externalize it. But frankly, my business didn't even begin until I wrote a post all about my burnout and depression. And it was terrifying. This was years ago. And I wrote about it and I shared it, and in our own little way, in our own little world, went viral, right? It didn't go viral like it was on CNN or anything, but in our world, our little kind of secular industry, everybody had read it. And it was the first time that I went public with it at all. And this was 2014 maybe. So the world was a lot different 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Not as many people were talking about it, and I was terrified, but everybody was super, super supportive.
That's great.
Right. Then all of a sudden, people started coming to me to learn more about it. And that's when I built the podcast and started building the blog. And it was kind of the inklings of the coaching program.
Wow.
But then the next step for me, and this is something I know you're going to relate to a lot. And I'm assuming you know who Ramit Sethi is, founder of I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and has a New York Times bestselling book and online courses and all this stuff. And when I was just starting to learn from him, one of the things that not he specifically, but like his group and his community and his program, they're like, oh yeah, you're the burnout coach. Because I talked to so many people about how to handle and overcome burnout. And I'd done this, what in my mind at the time was this huge launch. And I did this 5-day challenge and had like 1,100 people that signed up for the challenge. It was like so overwhelming. Oh my God, I've made it. Right. And then all of a sudden, burnout hit me like it's never hit me before in my life. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, where 2017 was essentially what I call my lost year from complete and total burnout. And one of the hardest things for me to ever write, but one of the most beneficial, was I wrote a piece on his website, of which 1 million people read that site a month, that was titled, How I Burned Out as a Burnout Coach. And then just 2 months ago, it happened again. But here's what I found changed. And I'm saying this some for the listeners, but I'm really just kind of saying this to you as well. It's getting easier to write about it faster and write about it when I'm in it. Because it's one thing to say, I'm in it now, nobody can know. I've got to figure it out first.
Right.
Then I'm going to write about it when I'm all better. That was kind of the way that I did it for a while. I'm super healthy. I'm helping everybody. Then I disappear. Nobody can know what I'm going through. Once I figure it out and I feel amazing again, then in retrospect, I can write about it. But I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm burned out and I'm sending a newsletter tomorrow. And I'm going to just tell everybody, guess what? I'm burned out right now. I just finished working on Cobra Kai for 15 months straight. And I was just on American Ninja Warrior. And I've been dealing with all this other stuff and major health issues in my family. This isn't a post about I was burned out a year ago and here's how I fixed it. I'm in it now. And the amount of support I got from that newsletter and the engagement that I got is more than I've ever gotten before. Do you know how many refund requests I got? 0. How many refund requests did you get on your Facebook Live when you were sharing your story?
None,
right? But why are we so terrified of that? Why are we so terrified as creatives and entrepreneurs to be honest? Like, why is that so hard?
Yeah, it's so fascinating talking about how you got better at sharing when you're in it, because as coaches, we're taught not to do that. We're taught to wait until you're on the other side and you have a lesson that you can share, And I noticed that Rachel Platten, do you know Rachel Platten?
I don't know.
She's a pop singer. On Instagram, she started sharing when she was in it. She was dealing with pregnancy stuff and other things. And I remember her like saying something specifically about that. Like, I'm sharing it while I'm in it instead of waiting till it's over. And she got so many comments. And even me reading it, it just was like, oh my gosh, like, so you're not on this pedestal, And one of the pieces that was hard for me as a coach coming out to talk about it, I always knew that I was going to talk about it. And it was on the back of my, it was back in my back of my head for so much of the time that I was depressed and when I started getting help. But it took a long time until I was really ready. But I was in this little circle of coaches, people in LA, some people that I knew, not people that I was all friends with, but people that were in my awareness who put on this air that they never have problems. And they're very successful. Like, there's one in particular, multimillionaire. She's done so well. And to me, like, there's no vulnerability in anything she has ever shared, ever. And so I've always had a hard time connecting with her because of that. But I thought, but she's multimillionaire. she's doing something, you know what I mean? So like clearly she never has problems and her life is great. And then I thought, oh, well, now there's something wrong with me because I'm not that. I'm not, great all the time. I have, struggles in my life. Things aren't always easy. And so I internalized that and, already was struggling with that piece. And then on top of it, depression and medication and all of these things. So all of that also made it challenging for me to share.
Well, speaking of sharing, I'm going to shamelessly plug you for a second, so you don't have to,
Okay.
and you still can if you'd like to. But you're writing your second book was a big part of this, and I know that the big you've self-published your last two books, correct? And this second one, you're working to now get it public, like get an agent and book
I don't
proposal and all
know.
that.
Yes.
So you're still working it all out.
Yes. I printed 100 hard copies because I really wanted to see my book in hardcover and I wanted to design all that. And so I have a few left of that run that I was selling and shipping myself. But yeah, so I'm not 100% sure because I'm developing another TV show and I just don't know. I'm open
Right.
to, yes.
Well, my point being, what I wanted to send people to, because it's already out there, is not just your previous book meant for this, but the audio reading.
Oh, thank you so much.
I have been doing this as a coach and podcaster for almost 10 years. I've been obsessed with personal development for far beyond that. I, like you, very much obsessed with personal development and high achievement. It's a part of my identity, which is both a superpower and very much a kryptonite, as we've discussed. Yes. I listened to your audiobook for 5 minutes and I felt flippin' invincible.
Oh my God.
I'm like, oh my God, I believe in myself right now. Like, you are definitely a performer, but I can tell that you really believe this and you really want to see that impact in others. And I've listened to a lot of amazing books that are so boring. Oh my God. I probably shouldn't listen to this while I drive because I'm going to fall asleep. And
I've been there.
5 minutes of your voice and me as somebody who listens to like Arnold Schwarzenegger motivational speeches and The Rock and Denzel Washington. Like I've got a YouTube playlist of this stuff that I put in when I'm like punching a punching bag or doing ninja stuff.
Yeah.
You like 5 minutes, the exact same effect. So I say that because I what I really admire is that you didn't just hand this off and have somebody do it. You put the whole thing together yourself. I remember reading your post about, another day in the audio booth recording with the pillows in my closet or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
But you saw it and you made it happen. And very, very few people do that. And it sounds like you're doing that with your latest book as well.
That means so much to me. Like, wow, thank you so much because I'm really proud of that audiobook. I got an editor who edited, and he's also a music composer. So he composed music for me. I had already purchased some music, and then he composed stuff to sound like it so it all fit together. It has music, and I just think it's really well done. I'm so proud of it. And if a chapter didn't sound good, I redid the whole thing, and it was so much work. But my theater background, I was like, I think I got this. Like, I think I know how to do this. And I had posted about this a little bit, but I write like I talk. And so, I was very nervous about my book because I don't write sophisticatedly.
Thank you, by the way, for not making that choice.
Thanks. I don't write in a sophisticated manner. And it's like, I hear a rhythm of words in my head when I write and I write that. And because I talk about this too, actually, I had an English teacher in high school tell me that my writing was better for something like advertising. And then I'm like, hey, I paid my rent with that book. Okay. But I was like, since I write like I talk, I feel like the audiobook should be good, because it sounds like I'm talking and I can, use all the inflection that I meant when I was writing it. So thank you. That means so much to me. Like that audiobook was definitely a lot of love went into that project.
Yeah, I know that it was a huge labor of love, and I wanted you to know
Yes.
that not only did it maybe pay off financially, but I think if it had that kind of impact on me in 5 minutes, I can't imagine the impact that it has on the people that are also listening to it that need to hear it even a lot more. Not that I don't need to hear it, but again, I have a lot of those voices, and I have becoming one of those voices myself. So it was a matter of, I want to make sure and do the research and be prepared. But 5 minutes later, I forgot that it was about preparation. I'm like, I believe I can make this happen. Right? But here's the other thing, and I think this is important. When it comes to this idea of belief and intuition and manifesting your dreams, there's a huge component that I think a lot of people miss. It's this idea of the woo-woo factor or the secret, right? The secret comes out, and all I need to do is create a vision board and manifest my dreams and write this down, and all my dreams become reality. I believe that that's actually important. A lot of people are like, oh, that's a bunch of crap. I believe in all of that. However, none of it means anything without action. You get that. You are a big part of the woo-woo factor and believing in the universe and putting it out there, but you're not just sitting back and saying, do all these things and your dreams magically come true. You got to put in the work. And you put in the work.
Thank you. I like to think that Meant for This is a combination of those two things. It's like a little bit of the woo stuff because I do think it's so important, but also a lot of the tangible pieces to it, because you're right. I mean, that's how I am. I'm an action taker, but I let the woo stuff guide me. And You Are the Magic has nothing tangible in it. It's a very different book. Well, it's not very different, but it's more woo, but it's like how to take action with it. Because I do think that's so important. And actually, if we're gonna mention The Secret, I listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks, and that's one of the original people that was supposed to be what The Secret was based on, their work, and long story about why they ended up taking Abraham Hicks out of the movie. But they talk about like, oh, it's so simple, like it's 3 steps, dream it up, believe it, ask for it, and receive. And what I have found, and maybe you have found this too with that simplicity, is like the second step there, because you can't receive anything if you don't believe you can receive it. And so there's like all these limiting beliefs that hold us back from actually getting these things. And then those limiting beliefs not only hold us back from receiving, but from taking the actions that could help us receive it. So for me, it's like it is that simple if you're, perfect in your mindset game and how you think about everything, which I just feel like nobody really is.
I was going to say there are exactly 0 people. Even the multimillionaires that have the Instagram photos of them in front of their jets. Mo money, mo problems. They're not any happier than us, and most likely they're probably even a lot more miserable and have a lot more issues to deal with, but that we don't see that side.
Right.
So all of that to say that I wanted to make sure that anybody that's listening to this that has been inspired by your story can continue to be inspired by your work. Where can they find you, your books, your sites, and make sure that they can follow along in this new stage of your journey?
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. I mean, like I said, I'm not coaching anymore, so I just putting all my energy into my books and the TV shows that I'm producing off of the books. So meantforthisbook.com. I mean, you can find Meant for This in any online retailer, but there's a trailer on that website and more, and you can see the table of contents and more information. So if you head over to meantforthisbook.com, and Instagram is sort of where I'm at these days at Hollywood Success Coach. And that's kind of all of my energy is on those 2 things. So definitely come find me and say hi.
Well, I implore everybody to do so, and I'm going to make sure to link to all of those resources in the show notes. But I also want to be very conscious of your time because it is valuable, and cannot thank you enough for being on the microphone with me today and putting up with all of my mansplaining and my interruptions and everything else. But I wanted to spark that fire that I knew that you
put
had.
Up with all of my insecurities and my deepest, darkest truth. So I really appreciate you creating this platform and creating this space and allowing me to share this, because hopefully we help somebody today.
I have no doubt that whomever is listening right now, there's at least one person that it's not just a matter of helping or giving them insights. We might have really, and you specifically sharing your story, could change the trajectory of their life for the better, which is why I do this, because I want to make sure that those stories get out there and you had that ability to impact others.
Thank
So
you.
on that note, cannot thank you enough for being here.
Thank you so, so much for having me.